So for everyone who's watching, thanks for coming today and watching our videos. My name is Jennifer Faye Smith, and I am with WriteWorks. I am an editor, book coach, and an author myself. But specifically, I'm here today to discuss with some of our other team members our monthly theme, which for October is metaphysical. And I'm especially excited about that because I am a metaphysical minister. So this is something very dear to me. And the people I'll be talking to today from my team are also authors of metaphysical books. So we thought this was a great opportunity to have a talking point. So first up, Tracy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role with WriteWorks?
Yeah, I am the communications director, which means I, get to meet a lot of new people in the book community through different platforms, and we're trying to build communities. So I'm really enjoying building those connections with others by just talking about books all of the time. And I'm an author too, and my series is the Spirit Warrior series, and I will talk a little bit about how I came to understand that was a metaphysical series.
Excellent. All right, Sky, let's learn a little bit about you too.
Right on. My name is Sky Erickson. With WriteWorks, I handle some social media direction and I'm an assistant coach, so I'm still learning a lot too. I'm an author of a metaphysical, I call it metaphysical mystery and romance. It's called Dark Little Dreams of St. Augustine. So it's a kind of a grab bag mix of mystery, some paranormal, supernatural, mystical things, and definitely some romance and spice. So if you're into that, check it out.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
thanks
All
for
right, being here today to have this discussion with me. So what I want to throw up first is what is metaphysical? For those of us who are watching who don't know what metaphysical is, what do you guys consider metaphysical? I'll let either of you jump on that.
For me, I always think of it as spirituality meets science and how they overlap, and how our world's coming to understand them not as one, but completely interconnected.
Excellent.
really cool. I definitely agree with that. But there are some people I think in the world that are resistant to either what they think is spirituality or maybe science. Maybe they don't trust or put their, faith in either of those things. But for me, I would simply describe it as there's more to our world than meets the eye. It's seeing the unseen, what's happening, beyond our limited kind of perceptions as a human being. Though our five senses are wonderful, there's so many things that happen on a level that we aren't consciously aware of, and I think
Mhm.
that's where our subconscious and all those other things come into play, and it's just a really fun realm to explore.
Absolutely. I agree. I can remember reading A Wrinkle in Time when I was a child and just the concepts, really pulling me in even as a child. So, can you point to something in your own past that kind of made you realize that you were interested in the metaphysical or in the otherworldly or beyond perception in your own life?
And as I reflected on that, question, I really found myself going back to even as a child, I was raised Catholic. So, one of the first books you're taught about is the Bible. And oh goodness, is that not full of metaphysical mayhem in all its forms and ways? There's people coming back from the dead, there's burning bushes, there's, things coming down from the sky. There's all sorts of, things that challenge our beliefs. And, I definitely think there's a lot to unpack there, as everyone knows. But other than that, I mean, you're growing up and just so many books and films that have really fantastical elements where they show humans that can do things, even like stuff like
Mhm.
X-Men and anything with witches and wizards, Sabrina the Teenage Witch. It's just inspires you to see characters that are pretty much human, that look and talk and breathe and bleed like us, but they're more than human. So I think just as a child, it's just all the stories. And, some are purely for fiction, some are based thousands of years ago in, human history. But for me, that was definitely a huge connection. Was just like I want to believe there's more to our lives than what is simply before us.
And I
Well
think
said.
a good point for that, Sky, is that you're not going to see what you don't believe in. So open your mind. Like I am constantly looking for fairies in the forest, and I just won't stop because I want to see one.
That's it. What if bugs are fairies? How would you feel about that?
Oh, we'd have to talk.
I know how you feel about bugs, so
Yeah, I'd have to
but
reshape my thoughts, man.
I mean, look at some of the way they are. The wings, they're tiny. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
hmm,
See,
might have to
Praying
rethink our
mantis.
thoughts on bugs.
Praying
yes,
mantis. Right there. Alien. Right there.
right.
Yeah.
Yep. So what
Completely.
type of metaphysical books do you prefer to read versus write, or do you find that they're similar?
I think, writing metaphysical fiction more than other genres. I mean, yes, it's the first one that I've dabbled in, but even in some of my other works, I find myself kind of missing that blend, that being able to kind of push the realms of what is real and not, and what we perceive. But when it comes to consuming, I absolutely, if I didn't seek out and consume some nonfiction in the metaphysical realm, or especially going beyond books and even to like content creators. YouTube was a huge learning tool for me when I got more into my metaphysical kind of like interests, because there's just so many people out there with different experiences,
Mhm.
teachings from all different realms, that you can kind of pick and choose, what you want from whichever realm, and kind of just create your own. I suppose, like Tracy said, you only see what you believe. So create your own world, your own perception, your own view based on that, and you can see magic in real life. So
So can I
that's
ask you a
what I find.
follow-up on that, Sky? Based on what you said, if you're reading or consuming a lot of nonfiction metaphysical, does that help you then to write fiction metaphysical? Does that help give you more ideas or open your mind to broader expanses?
Yes, 100%, absolutely yes. There are some elements in my series ongoing that I would never have had the pure inspiration to come up with myself. There's all these really, if you look into that realm, there's so many accounts of just wild experiences that people have had, and if you experience it and it was real to you, then it's real, right? So
Yes.
you just have to, I believe what people, when they share their experiences and they had, some changes in themselves after having said experience. For example, like near death experiences are a very interesting kind of realm to rabbit hole to go down.
Hmm.
And I just think that really shows that, there is something beyond that we don't quite know and we can't touch really when we're here in this body. But not saying I want to have an NDE. That's not really, that's not what I'm trying to say.
That's a
No,
goal.
but yeah, so learning from others' experiences and just other kind of awesome stories and paranormal, supernatural kind of things that happen in the world. Absolutely. Consuming and reading or watching that content is a huge inspiration, and it will help you a lot if you are trying to write metaphysical.
Absolutely. And how about you,
Yeah.
Tracy? What do you find for writing versus consuming? Or is there within the genre differences? Like, do you like to read one type of metaphysical but like to write another? What's been your experience?
Um, it's funny because it kind of ties into the question you were asking about what first interested you in that. And when I look back, so there was just never a time in my life where I could look back and not feel like that other realm was there, even though as a child I couldn't name it because I think I blended with it more as a child and it just was. I had a very spiritual grandma who I spent a lot of time with back when I was like 4 or 5. And we would sing Jesus Loves Me when we went to sleep. And I can tell you, all I felt from that woman was the light, the spirit. And we talked very little when we were like, my mom would go to bingo and we would kind of go to bed and she would put me to bed and we'd, you know, I didn't know that what we were doing back then was she was teaching me about spirit. And most of it was silent, which was amazing. So very early on in my life, I think because she helped me understand how to embrace that other side was there. I saw spirits when I lived with her, and when I got a little bit older, I started to hear spirits, and so I just literally never remember a time in my life that wasn't normal until I got older, when the world tells you it's not normal. So for what I like to read, though, it's a lot of ghosts. I like ghosts, but they have to be done well.
Mhm.
I find that a lot of the horror ghosts aren't metaphysical ghosts, um, because ghosts aren't scary all the time. They can be, but the ones I encountered certainly weren't early on. Um, and so in my writing, there's a little bit of that spirit world, but it looks different. And I have to go back and agree with what Sky said about reading a lot of nonfiction, because there's something I can't name yet that sort of, when I can understand the science, even on a base level, it's just like that human part of me starts to say, oh, that's what I've always been feeling in a scientific term, or that's what I've always known, that's what I've always seen. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
It does, and I wanna give you a follow-up as well based on
Yeah.
what you just said, because you mentioned ghosts, and for instance, in horror stories, they're presented as something negative or scary.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of people are introduced to the metaphysical as children through fairy tales or folk tales, and they're usually cautionary. If you're bad, the boogeyman will get you, or this creature will get you. Don't wander into the woods because these creatures will get you. Those sorts of things. And it can instill a sense of fear into people of metaphysical, of that it's a negative. It usually is a warning to stay on the right path, that sort of thing. But what I'm hearing you say is that your experience has been very uplifting with the metaphysical, more from silent moments than from cautionary tales, if you will.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me into what I wanted to ask next, which is, when you write your metaphysical books, what do you want to bring to people, the reader? What do you want them to experience or to understand or to open their minds to?
I would say that the biggest two things are for people to reconnect to their own wholeness and divinity. So seeing that they're part of this bigger thing, whether we call it source or God or the universe, spirit, um, to remember that connection. And the other half of it is to recognize like the light and the dark in themselves. Because I think a lot of those cautionary tales and creatures that are written as fearful are really like, they can be symbols for the darker parts of us.
Hmm.
And I think as human beings, we're taught to fear the dark, um, in ourselves and, externally. So I think that letting people realize both parts of themselves are totally okay, they're totally normal to be in our world, whether it's externally or internally.
Agreed, kind of a balance.
Yeah.
And Sky, same question directed at you with Dark Little Dreams of St. Augustine. What were you hoping for your reader to be introduced to through that book in a metaphysical sense?
Besides being wildly entertaining, being one of my hopes, one of my sincerest ambitions in becoming a writer was, it's not necessarily to influence the way people think, but to get them to question the world around them, whether
Hmm.
it be outside of themselves, but especially within themselves. And that kind of relates to what Tracy was saying about, going within and acknowledging we have both light and dark inside of us. And I think everyone knows that there's darkness in the world because we see it every day, especially recently. And that's existed for thousands of years. And so many stories are, light versus dark. It's just such a compelling thing because we all understand that battle, because we have it internally. So when it comes to self-reflection, I just, when we stop asking questions, we stop learning. And whether that's about the world around us or ourselves, I want people to leave the world of Dark Little Dreams and be like, and look at the world around them and be like, okay, something's going on. There's more than meets the eye, because that's really what the main character kind of goes through. She starts out pretty naive, and at the end of the book, it's just kind of like, whoa, like my whole world's kind of turned upside down. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but that's really the vibe, is just ask questions. I want people to ask questions, especially with given current events. Just keep asking questions, don't stop.
Excellent.
Yeah, can I
Excellent.
add to that? As a reader of Dark Little Dreams, um, the questions, uh, yeah, without spoilers too, but like kind of questioning the truth is a huge part of that because, we could go really deep and say that there's more than one truth, but let's start with like the base of questioning the truths we've always been told, um, including what we're capable of. And now we're back to like the metaphysical powers that we just intuition, the things that we've been taught to say that's nothing. These are the rules, these are the truths, and everything else is kind of crazy. Like you have to be logical over spiritual in many cultures, I think.
I agree with you. Kind of in line with that, when we talked about the folklore and the fairy tales with the cautionary tales, what if some of those creatures were actually meant to be spiritual guides versus the evil we're going to get you if you're bad? That's kind of what I'm hearing you say is to question everything, look at your assumptions, and evaluate your own beliefs. Would that be
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to Sky's going within, because that's where
Exactly.
the truth is, because we all have a slightly different perception, I guess.
Exactly.
Y'all giving
I,
me some chills with these thoughts. I feel it like through my body. It's resonating very well.
I've got a little bit. I'm going to read a question here. It's a little bit long, so bear with me. Throughout history, the occult and other metaphysical practices have been demonized to the point of those who openly dabble in it being sentenced to prison or death. In modern society, it has grown popular. It is now part of the mainstream pop culture and nearly everyday life. Many of these practices stem from sacred religious beliefs of many other cultures, but aren't represented respectfully in some spaces, especially in TV. I'm sorry, TV, movies, and social media. What are your thoughts on the evolution of the occult in our society? What are the positives of the occult being more mainstream, and what are the negatives in your opinion? Sky, if I can come to you with that one first.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big ones for me is, like you said, where it touches on kind of like social media, which is such a big space of you can get great information there, and you can get so much misinformation and misrepresentation of certain realms. And I think some spirituality and metaphysical is getting kind of gets a little bit of a bad rap on social media these days because there's a lot of people scamming people saying they're healers, and they're gonna give your tarot
Mm,
readings and your reikis from a distance, and like there's a lot of people that are doing some really bad stuff with it. So like that's one thing I really don't like that I've seen
Mhm.
recently, because I think it's wrong to, obviously scamming people in any form is uncool, but you're using some really sacred, awesome like things that some people train for a long time to like actually have, they actually have that gift, and they've worked, they've done the work, they've put in the effort and the time and the training, and it's just it's hard to see that. So that's one thing I don't really care for, seeing a lot of recently. But on the positive, I think it's really cool that there's a lot, like you said, people used to get put to death for this stuff, and now it's like, no, you can walk into a metaphysical store just, on my way to work. There's like probably two of them, one in the mall and like one on the side of the road, and I can go in and I can buy crystals, I can get sage, like all of these things. Is like, it's not like you have to go to some hidden space to get it. Like it's there, and I think some of those places do it respectfully and cool. And so I like that it's seen as almost like people can openly say like, I'm pagan, Wiccan, I do this, that, I identify as a witch, and like people aren't going to automatically be like, oh, you're a freaking weirdo, like get away from me. Like more people will be like, oh, that's super cool. People aren't ashamed to be open about it. So that's one thing I really enjoy. And of course it's fun seeing it represented respectfully in all sorts of different media, but it's hard to make the discernment sometimes, because I'm, as much as I look into this stuff and try to educate myself as best as I can. It's hard. I don't know everything yet, and I'm still learning. So as a metaphysical writer, I want to be conscious that if I do delve into any of those things, that I treat it respectfully and with care.
What
Excellent.
about you, Tracy?
I think the fact that we're coming back to the internal understanding, if you will, of the sacred feminine in our world, and that's what's going to advance us, I think, to the next level, is because it's coming back. I think that we're opening our minds more to the metaphysical, because that's very intertwined with the sacred feminine. That, wise women and the village healer in ancient times, those were women more often than not. And I want to say, without having any sources to back me up, that I think the males who were doing that sort of healing back then were, and I'm talking, like right before the witch trials in Europe, basically, when women were still very powerful within their tiny villages. Even the males who were practicing this were practicing this with a reverence for the sacred feminine. We are able to give life, and that comes in more forms than just giving birth. I think the resurgence of that bringing that part of our humanity back and being able to kind of hold it up and examine it is allowed more people to open their minds to the metaphysical. And like Sky said, there's some kind of downsides to that. And as someone who's identified as a witch for a couple of decades now or so, I do get a little bit annoyed when people are a witch this week, if you will. I mean, there's something to be said about dabbling for sure. Spirituality is something we should question, first of all, and it should be our own path, which sometimes means more than one path and changing paths. But I think we all have seen people who are just, it's like if check print was in, that's what they would wear, and that's why this week they're a witch. But stuff is tough to swallow when you have the deep respect for what it means to, and like Sky said, to do the work behind it. So yeah, it's a mixed bag for sure. But I think I personally will I'll take the win. I'll take the good part of it. That I'm not so afraid these days to walk out on the street. Not that I'm out there wearing my witch hat per se, but like I said, if you're out there just having a conversation, not in most spaces that I would choose to be in, it would not be a fearful thing to tell people you were a witch. So I'll take the win.
Why aren't you wearing your hat now?
I got it. It's not even October 1st.
But it's close enough.
Yes.
By the
Next
time
month.
people seen this video, it will
True.
be.
True.
So what I'm hearing is that with the resurgence of metaphysical being more mainstream, the accessibility is there, and more people are dabbling in it. But by the same token, we're also seeing a lot of deflecting, and we're also seeing a lot of imposters. Would you say that the written form of metaphysics, if you will, or metaphysics in written form, as in books, changes the way the information is received versus a quick video or a flash? Because we're living in an age now where we're living with data points, and we're seeing just really quick line items. But when you're reading a book, you've got a whole framework from one end to the other of the story to take in all of that information. Do you feel like that gives you a cleaner representation of metaphysics versus a quick video or a quick something that you might catch on social media? Is there a difference in your mind?
Yes.
Throw it to either.
Yes. I mean, for me, if I have to sit there and I'm gonna read a whole book, and that's a commitment, I'm gonna remember it and think about it a lot more than I probably watched, and I'm not even on social media as often as some people, but hundreds, thousands I don't even know, millions of videos by this point, and do I remember like that many of them? Like, no, even if I liked it or saved it, it's not going to stick with me. But I mean, I'll be damned if I don't remember every book. Not maybe not every single thing that happened in every book, but I'll remember the book and the story and the message, because you have to sit there and sit with it. And it's not just it's not a brief, little 2, 3, 10-second thing. It's a whole process. It's a whole journey, and you have to go within as you read and
Yeah.
bring everything to life, inside your own imagination. So yeah, there's a difference, and I think that's why a lot of people avoid reading, is because they don't want to put in the
Yep.
work. So the
Yep.
struggle is real when you want to make your living, writing books and selling stories, right? Because people are slowly getting conditioned to not really have the patience for it, and that's why we write, man, because we want to fight that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're talking about that reader interaction, Sky, is, from a teacher point of view, we say reader interaction is you got to bring a really big piece of yourself to that story. And that's why stories are so powerful, because they can show us ourselves either like as a mirror, what we are now, or we can sometimes see ourselves like what could be, like, oh my God, I never would have imagined I could have done that. And I'm talking about kind of everyday stuff too, but um, those people who, like, if we're talking about metaphysics specifically, those people who are like, oh my God, I've had an experience like that. I've heard something that I can't explain. I've seen something that I can't explain. And when you see it in story, we're, as human beings, that's part of being so connected to story, is that it's representative of our own experiences. Sometimes we need that almost as a reminder. And again, like you were saying, it's more work. I think that's very much like the metaphysical journey. It's you aren't going to work on that intuition or those gifts. You're not going to grow them unless you work on them. So maybe reading, the act of reading and having to put that work in is a little metaphysical too, because you're bringing that magic of yourself to it.
So it sounds like metaphysics is very subjective, which is to say it's your own personal belief and your own personal the way you see things. Um, so I can see why reading your books and having that personal part of you as the author touches, especially in fiction. Obviously, I'm talking about fiction now. Although there could be nonfiction ones as well, where that emotional component would touch on a reader's emotions and maybe make them question their own beliefs and how they see the world around them, or what they can't explain. Would that make sense to you? As like a viable way of getting a metaphysical idea across to a reader?
I think I need that question again.
You're talking about bringing yourself as the author into the story and telling your a portion of you is there
Yep.
in your story. So that would make it seem as if it was an emotional connection with your reader, which touches on that subjective part of all of us. Metaphysics is subjective. There's no great, as much as we're trying to tie science into it, there is no professional, there is no, guru. This is it absolutely. Otherwise it wouldn't be metaphysical. It's beyond the physical. So that brings us back to the emotional, and how we experience it is what drives what I believe in, is how I feel about it. Um, are you seeing that when you bring yourself into your story, that you're presenting your emotion and your story to touch your reader in such a way that it touches on their belief systems, and it's not a competition, it's more of an idea of, can you see it from my point of view, can you open your mind to that this might be real?
Yeah, I think, you bring the human emotion into it. And because if in my words, you're sort of a spirit in human form, you're experiencing this human journey, and it's the humans who have all of these range of emotions, right? Whereas if you think about going back to spirit, it's just like this pure love. But then we complicate things by being human. So that human journey that you bring is interesting, because you are trying to show, you're trying to make a specific connection, but what I find interesting is sometimes you're going to make a different connection than you even knew. Like in one of the things that I think has been the biggest compliment for book one of my series was that my main character was relatable. And there's so many books out there I cannot relate to because they're making things look fluffy, and I don't know. I go for the dark and the gritty and the with the person point of view, third person deep, you can really see what somebody's feeling and their why, if you will. But so they might get something completely different than you were trying to get across. But I think it doesn't matter how you make that connection. It just matters that you make that connection, that human um, experience basically is kind of hooks them.
Absolutely. So, Sky, can you tell me a little bit about how your character in your book, how your process, how did you touch people's readers' emotions to get them to open up to your concepts? What was your driving force in your book?
Besides all the spicy stuff, no, I'm just playing. It really relates a lot to my own like personal growth journey. So, it was very therapeutic, right? And like her experience is not my experience. That's not what I'm saying. But as far as there are definitely, as a writer, you're writing a character, and I don't care what character you're writing, there's going to be some pieces of you in there. So
Absolutely.
I absolutely did. She's got insecurities, but like who doesn't, right? So I think like Tracy said, putting that relatability in there, even if it's just a couple traits, like no reader is gonna 100% match my character and be like, oh my god, this book is about me because like we're literally the same person. Like, no, but that's why it's a fictional experience, but what you can learn from it and feel from it is super real. So I just wanted to take them kind of in her head. There's a lot of internal dialogue that goes on in my book, where she's reacting to like what's happening to her, her thoughts about what's going on around her. So I just really wanted to kind of give the readers like a courtside seat, if you will, to Cadence's journey. It's very personal because you're basically in her head the whole time, and that goes from when she's scared and naive to when she's excited and falling in love, and to when she's literally scared shitless. So you're there the whole time. So I wanted to basically just write a character that, even if you can't 100% relate to her, even if you're not a queer woman or in college or falling in love and getting your heart broken, there might be at least something in there that you might find of yourself in Cadence, or at least what she's going through, even if it's on a grander scale than what the book is at face value, especially as the series continues. There's a whole overarching kind of theme that's going on. So that's really all. That's all I got. That's a loaded.
No, that's
I
good.
want
though.
to add to that about your book, if I could, because you started out with saying, besides being very spicy, in like, isn't that part of the human experience for many of us too? Is that here we are again in these bodies and fueled by hormones, if you will, and soul and passion and connecting with other people. For many of us, that's a sexual thing, and I think it's interesting that ties all the way back to that divine feminine, sort of reclaiming that sacred part of us and testing the boundaries is another piece of the spicy parts of Sky's book, is testing the boundaries of what testing the boundaries we think exist. How's that? Because Cadence finds out there's a much wider variety of possibilities out there, and that journey, going along that journey with her, it was cool. And that, I think, our theme last month was spicy, and I think that is important to us as a team because it's part of that human experience. We're telling stories, we're celebrating all of the parts of us, and for those of us who feel like sexual beings, that's a part that the world has tried to sort of hush, if you will, at best.
I didn't want to lead with my driving force was that I was horny, but it was part of it.
Well, I will help you there.
But yeah, I mean, maybe that is kind of like how it started, because a little bit, but it turned into a whole other thing. It
Yeah,
evolved so much, even from the first draft to the final product. There's a lot
sure.
less metaphysical and a lot more just straight sex at first. So bless my editor's heart.
That's
But
what
again,
we
it's
do,
a-
though. That's what coaches do, is we say, this is amazing. Now bring it further, right? Like,
yeah,
take this good part and, expand on that.
it's a very healing thing. As not only a woman, but a queer woman to be unashamed about expressing your sexuality, your desire. Because, like you said, we've been kind of shamed into silence or taught that it's not okay to say these things out loud. What you do behind closed doors, like just don't bring it out in the open. Okay, it's out in the open now. My family is reading this book. People I don't even know are reading this book. Like, so that was a really weird feeling, when knowing that it was out in the world once it published. I was like, oh shit, I can't take it back now. Like, cat's out of the bag.
Yes.
Well, you both bring up good points, and I'll just round this all up by saying that what I like about both of your books is that they explore metaphysical concepts and ideas, but it's not doctrine or dogma. It's not dry, and it's not driving it down your throat. It's actual human experiences with your characters, and you can see the pieces of you as the author in it, where they're having what other people would consider normal human lives, but they're also bringing out their own internal belief systems and presenting that in a way it's like, this is what I think, what do you think? And allowing the reader to choose to look at that or not to look at that. But you're doing it as a human being. Like, it's not coming from a place of this is the guru and it's a religious text. That's what I liked about your books, is that they do touch on the common thing we all deal with in being human, and how we live and how we are horny and how we relate to other people and how we live our lives. But also your characters have how they see it through a metaphysical lens, but they still have jobs and they still have lives and they still have partners. So that was one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you today, was you bring up these great concepts and challenge readers to maybe open their minds a little bit more to seeing what things that through a lens they never used before. And you do it very well through that reciprocal, we're all human, we all experience a lot of the same things. So thank you both for being here today and joining me for this talk. And for those watching, please check out all of our socials. This month is Metaphysical Month, and we'll be putting a lot of information out there, asking a lot of questions. Join the conversation, join us on Discord, become part of our community. Thank you very much, and I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Back from the Right Works team.
Bye.
Bazinga.
Bazinga.
I don't even really watch that show, but